on YouTube and Riverside. So I'll do the intro, I guess, and we'll jump right in.
Let's go over the thing again. So you're going to introduce yourself, then I will introduce myself, and
Then you
maybe
introduce our
I'll
guest.
introduce Robert, and Robert, you can say hello, guys, and then Mark will introduce the show topic. Okay.
All right. Take one. In 5, 4, 3. Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another episode of Texting. I'm Man Alive in Taipei.
And I'm your no Walt Whitman in St. Petersburg, Russia. And today we're joined by special guest and great friend of the show. You may have heard him with some of his audio contributions in the past. Most notably, he gave a nice story about the poet has slipped my mind, and we're going to go to take two. Do you remember you gave the long story about, of course I should know this.
Elliot, right?
No, it was about Ginsberg's friend, though.
Gary Snyder. Yeah.
Gary Snyder. We included that, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Take two.
So wait, let's just recollect. So what? Wait. So what did you told us about the dream you had, right? You ended up recording that, right?
Yeah, because I met my partner through Gary Snyder, in a roundabout way, and then I stayed with him at an agriturismo in Italy, and then I had a strong dream about him and Ginsberg the night we were there.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So.
All right. I'm ready.
Take two. And 5, 4, 3. Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another episode of Texting. I'm Man Alive in Taipei.
And I'm your no Walt Whitman in St. Petersburg, Russian Federation. Today, we are joined by a special guest, Robert, who is a friend of the show and has even contributed on several occasions, most notably retelling his fascinating dream sequence, including the beat poets Allen Ginsberg and Gary Snyder. Welcome to Texting, Robert.
Hello, I'm Robert, live in the hills near Rome, and I work at a high school teaching English and some literature sometimes.
Well, all right. We have a literary topic today. Our text will be D.H. Lawrence's seminal essay, Why the Novel Matters. And I know that you, Robert, have been requesting a Lawrencian text for some time, so I thought this would be a good one because it's relatively short and manageable, and we can, in addition to discussing this particular text, we can maybe touch upon some other Lawrence related issues. So I figured
okay.
Well, why don't you tell us about your Lawrence origin story or your interest in Lawrence? Just go wherever you want with that.
I studied English literature and philosophy at Manchester University a long time ago, and we were lucky we had to choose 5 authors in the last year, and one I chose was I chose Blake, but I also chose Lawrence. And I got a bit obsessed with him, I would say, in terms of also the biography of his life. There was a very good library in Manchester, so I used to spend a lot of time just reading what he did in his life, I guess. The story of meeting Frida, the German woman, and then getting discontent with the life of England at that time. I don't know, I just probably related to it some way. Also my life took me away from England to live in Italy and that's one of the countries he loved a lot, I think. So yeah, definitely relatable. Also the background, because he had he talked a lot in Sons and Lovers, especially about being from his father being working class and his mother being kind of lower middle class, and that was exactly my background also, where my father was not such an intellectual, and my mother had, yeah, not only pretensions, but she was, a bit Catholic upbringing. She had some of this background, and also the same dynamic was played out pretty much in their marriage as in Lawrence's marriage. So yeah, I guess there was some points of contact. So
Well, we know he was from Nottingham. How about yourself?
yeah, I'm from Exeter, but I mean, for example, my grandfather was worked on the trains, the railways. So I mean, that's not an industrial part of the country like Nottingham, but I mean, there's some background like that, I guess. So.
Right. How about you? You're no Walt Whitman.
Yeah, I think we had a copy of Lady Shatterley um, at 225, which is where I grew up on 225 East Forest Hills in Phoenix, Arizona. So we would have had some Lawrence, my dad being English and studying literature as well growing up. But my main contact with Lawrence was during my MA in Leeds, where for our MA program, we just chose 4 classes total. So the whole MA is 4 classes. And one of my 4 classes was Blake, and another of the 4 was Lawrence. So
So,
I
and your other
read,
two?
pardon, the other 2, one was focusing on texts related to Kashmir, not the Led Zeppelin song. And the other was contemporary American writers in general. So that one we weren't as concentrated on one thing. But anyway, yeah. So worked with a woman named Fiona Beckett, who still teaches at the School of English, University of Leeds, and she's a Lawrencian. And I guess my only point is at that time I read quite a few of his novels like in succession. So I read Women in Love, Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow, and maybe others, and just started reading his essays, his poetry, and thinking about him as a figure. And by the end, I found him quite tedious. And so I will be here today making the argument for why Lawrence is a bit of a muppet. So,
The anti-Lawrencian. Okay, well, we'll
hence
get
my
into
name today. You're no Walt Whitman.
I got it. Well, we'll get into some of those other works in a bit, but it's interesting that you both paired Lawrence with Blake. I think that is, there's a parallel there which many people have noticed. Like, what is it? Why do those two English authors from different eras, seem to go together well, or, a particular type of reader or student of literature might be attracted to both Blake and Lawrence? Any ideas about that?
For sure, but maybe I'll let Robert tackle this first.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to explore Tom's comment about a Muppet before, but
I didn't know. I was interested in which word was going to come to my brain, so Muppet was not pre-planned. But I liked it afterwards.
You've been influenced by Craig. That's your Scottish dialect coming out now. Okay. But anyway, Blake and Lawrence. Why this pairing?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my own idea about progression of Lawrence's life and to what extent he fulfilled what he wanted, what he wrote about. No, because I think there is a case to be made that he didn't really live out exactly what he was writing. And I think there were strong reasons why. I mean, maybe we can talk about that later, but I would say basically he was he was also a mystic in the same way as Blake was. I mean, that to me is, which in English culture we don't tend to, unless they're perhaps Christian or Celtic or something, we don't tend to to really regard mystics as fundamental part of the culture, like in other cultures, perhaps like in India or the Middle East. I don't know, in Turkey. So to me, they're both important mystics, mystical
That's
thinkers, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly the word that I had in mind. And I'll
Mm.
just point out that Simon Critchley is trying to change that British um,
Okay.
prejudice against
Hmm.
mysticism.
Okay.
But anyway, actually, he kind
Interesting
of
book.
approaches it from a Christian mystic point of view. So I would say he misses the Blakean, Lawrencian
Yeah.
uh, strand of mysticism.
But Blake
Mm.
was a Christian mystic.
Yes, I mean that is true, but I guess Critchley focuses on like these Christian saints.
Mm.
So I mean, I was really excited to read this on our friend Steve's recommendation, but I was a bit put off by all the by the focus on these Christian elements of the mystic
I mean,
tradition.
both Blake and Lawrence were, I mean, conventional religion, at least. No, I mean,
True, true. Although I have to say, like when I read the complete works of William Blake, I was struck by the really strong Christological,
mm,
I don't know, ideology behind it all, and that is something that we don't find in Lawrence.
mm,
But yeah, maybe we can explore that further. Let's
mm.
quickly look at some of those other works. I was going to say this. I think this essay is probably the first exposure I had to Lawrence before I read any of the novels or poetry or uh, longer nonfiction works. I read this essay, "Why the Novel Matters," because it was in like a Norton anthology, you know, textbook that I was using for an introductory literary course. Um, but let's look at some of these other works of his. So I guess he's probably best known for his novels. I personally, I've read Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow. I don't know if I ever finished Women in Love. Aaron's Rod's really good. Kangaroo is about his time in Australia. And by the way, he stayed in an area near our friend Maria's hometown. Um,
Nice.
yeah. Uh,
Wollongong, I believe, right? That's where she
yeah.
lives.
Ulongong. Um, yes.
No, Wollongong.
Okay. Well,
Unless I'm
I'm not,
mispronouncing it. I
yeah,
mean, it
I'm
has a
not.
W.
Yes, I know. Maybe
Okay.
I'm pronouncing it as though it's a Korean word, but anyway, the Plume Serpent, Lady Chatterley's Lover, of course. I would say probably my favorite of the novels is The Man Who Died. Prove me wrong.
I was just reading this morning as a preparation for this talk because I felt it's kind of the most relevant text in some ways. Yeah. So my favorite is Woman in Love, but yeah.
Okay. And Tomek hates them all, right?
I think he's a very good writer.
Uh-huh.
So I would say writing captivating plots and characters is a strength. And that's not necessarily what I'm challenging today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've read some of the stories too. How about the poetry? I really like Birds, Beasts, and Flowers. I think that's a great
I agree.
collection.
I'll tell you a
Okay.
little story.
Yeah.
When I was I think around 20, I was at a kind of what you would call New Age community. and there was a New Year's Eve celebration, and I chose to read. I can't remember the title, but it's something about the dead. Not like Joyce, but the
Ship
Ship of
of
Death. The
Death.
Ship of Death.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
read this like thinking it's like transcendent, and they're all going to really go for it. And people were like, like I was a bit naive about the New Age at that time. They didn't really want to hear about death on New Year's Eve. It was fun.
Have you built your ship of death? Oh,
Death.
have
Yeah,
you?
that's a good poem, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. I think it was inspired by a visit to the museum, and he saw this Egyptian stuff and the Egyptian ship of death that was,
Whoa, that sounds like the Tom York story we discussed.
Exactly. I think I may have mentioned that when we were talking about Pyramid Song, but anyway, the plays, I don't think I've ever read a Lawrence play. Have either of you?
No.
To be honest, I don't think so either.
So I think before I read the novels, I was fascinated by one of these nonfiction works. It doesn't even have its own Wikipedia article. It's like in red here. There it is. Psychoanalysis and the Unconscious and Fantasia of the Unconscious. The two works are usually published in one volume, and this is a fascinating I don't know if it's an analysis so much as a reflection on Freud and Jung. So just imagine Lawrence dealing with these theories of contemporary psychology and psychoanalysis.
He also talks about I remember him talking a lot about the solar plexus and this kind of and the more the Eastern ideas as well. No,
the
I
solar
don't remember what in
plexus,
relation
yes.
to the ganglia and this kind of stuff. No?
Yes, exactly. Like everything begins with the solar plexus. The human being, man alive, grows from that, basically from the navel. And so he seemed to me, when I read that, I thought, okay, he has found something that Freud and even Jung missed, So I thought that was a very important work. Another nonfiction work I'll mention is his what's it called? I saw it earlier today. It's basically his analysis of the Book of Revelation,
that's a classic.
Apocalypse, and the writings on Revelation. That's highly recommended. Really good. And then
as you scroll down, I recognize Mornings in Mexico. I'm pretty sure
from the travel books. Yeah. So this is something that Aldous Huxley was pointing out in the interview or conversation about Lawrence that was playing before we hit record here. But it's pretty amazing what he produced in 44 years. I mean, look at all this. He did travel books, he did translations. Bunin, the gentleman from San Francisco, Bunin was a Nobel Prize laureate, and Lawrence translated one of his works into English. So, translations, travel books, poetry, plays that none of us have read or seen, novels, short stories. Pretty impressive, right? Pretty prolific. Even if the quality of all of them is not necessarily what we would hope it to be. I mean, that's one of the criticisms of his work. It's inconsistent.
I don't know if now is a good time to make a passing comment on Mornings in Mexico.
Yeah, go ahead.
By the way, just below that, I saw a book about Italy, Robert. So I don't know if you knew
Sea in Sardinia. Yeah.
Beautiful book. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that Mornings in Mexico is kind of a prominent example of what I like and don't like about Lawrence, because so the first, maybe the good is quite captivating stories, imagery, and really romanticizes, the Mexican landscape and the Mexican people. Maybe in a similar way, the way that Kerouac kind of revels and describes it in On the Road. But on the other hand, it's like Lawrence has all these ideals of how man should be, like raw and primal, and then he projects a lot of that onto like the locals, but it does come off like cringe, like yeah,
kind
just
of noble savage
exactly. That's
trope.
exactly how
Yeah.
it felt. And I think he lived in New Mexico as well, right, for a while with with some of his writer
He's
friends.
buried there. I've been to his tomb. I prostrated myself on it, I think.
Nice.
I
That's what I did for
I did
Tolstoy.
too.
Oh,
I
wow.
did too. I saw the typewriter
location.
that he used. Yeah.
Right.
Takes a while to get out there. It's not
like right
easy
up
to
in
find.
in the hills.
But yeah, so that's like, yeah, I didn't like that though, that
Yeah.
instinct. I don't know if you guys have any response to that, but
this Huxley interview I'm talking about, he was just saying, like, on the one hand, he says, oh, the Mexicans are in touch with the dark gods and whatnot, but then he rails at them like the worst kind of colonialist general, like a I don't know, someone, one of the army commanders in India or someplace, right?
Yeah, I remember him being very impatient and insulting of them as well, right? So either way, the point is it was very much like othering, right? As opposed to just being like, these are just some guys.
Yeah. And for all his disdain of idealism, he seems to like occasionally fall into that trap himself, like trying to live his ideal of man alive, for instance,
For
like
sure.
it's a great idea, and his warning is something we should heed, but we should also note that it's easy to fall into that same trap. Like anti-idealism itself becomes an ideal. You know what I mean?
Sure, but I just don't. I do see him as an idealist, though. I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't even understand how he would have the first label.
What, anti-idealist?
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into that when we read this essay, because he's like his attack on the philosophers with their ideas,
Sure, but he's at the same moment like espousing a different ideal.
Well, I know, and this is one of the
saying, though, yeah.
tension. This is one of the tensions and contradictions, that we find in his work. But I would just say, and we'll get into the text maybe now, would be a good time for that. But as I say, this was my first encounter with him, and for me, it was inspirational. It was like, I've never read anything like this, and it inspired me. It excited me. It's like, yes, this voice, I can relate to him.
It's a very distinct voice, a very alive voice. I enjoyed reading this yesterday, even if I was disagreeing the whole time. I still felt revitalized by the experience.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Why the novel matters. I mean, we can read excerpts, I guess. Let me put it on the screen here. Let's have some screen sharing music. Nope. Okay. All right. So, Why the Novel Matters by D.H. Lawrence. I'll just start. We have curious ideas of ourselves. We think of ourselves as a body with a spirit in it, or a body with a soul in it, or a body with a mind in it. Mens sana in corpore sano. The years drink up the wine and at last throw the bottle away. The body, of course, being the bottle. Body bottle. Yeah, that first paragraph drew me in immediately. You know, who starts an essay like that? We have curious ideas of ourselves.
Yeah.
Any comments?
Yeah, I mean, this paragraph did not make a lot of sense to me because it seems like he's annoyed with the separation that the West has allegedly made between the body and the mind, right?
Yeah, the Cartesian mind body split. Yeah.
First of all, yeah, but I think we're first in our time. I think we're past that, or at least there's in terms of our discourse, people are quite quick to connect the two and recognize the relationship between the two. And I don't even understand how he's using that expression mens sana and corpore sano, which when I researched it means what? A healthy mind and a healthy body.
Yep.
But that is actually often used to disparage
Talk
the
about
idea that they're
the
separate.
integration of the
so
two.
I didn't understand why he chose to use that there.
Because it's still splitting them, you know, at least linguistically. And the assumption is that the mind controls the body, right? Like the mind, the healthy mind comes first, and then that leads to a healthy body.
Okay,
so
and it might have been
there's a kind of
time.
There's a kind of hierarchy there, implied at least, right?
Yeah, I think the line. I mean, I'm reading on a bit, but can I read on a bit?
Please.
Yeah.
I mean, the next paragraph where he says, "Why should I imagine that there is a me which is more me than my hand is?" No, so it's like I mean, it's also in The Man Who Died. He wants a direct connection with life, but it's through the physical body, not through abstract thought. I mean, I mean, I guess that's what we're talking about, but I think he goes a step further than most people would do, no? To say that the mind, the hand itself, because he wants to see things. I mean, that's why I think he's just Blakean, no? That he says, like Blake said, no, if the mind could see, or no, if the doors of perception are cleansed, no, then we see everything as it is, no. So I think
Infinite.
that's what he's describing in a different way for me. So yeah, infinite.
Yeah, well, this is his, you know, anti-intellectualism, I guess. I mean, he's kind of reacting to the Bloomsbury crowd, I guess, right? Virginia Woolf and her circle, you know, all of these fine, respectable people discussing literary matters at their little salons. He's reacting against that. That's how I've always read this, you know.
Yeah, but I think he goes back as well. I mean, more, you know, in like when he mentions philosophers and saints, he you know, he's including all of Western. I don't know, from Plato on, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, he does mention Plato a bit later, but yeah,
I mean, there was a mistake. I mean, because another essays, I don't know where it was. He wrote about he loved the ancient Greek pre-Socratic philosophers. No, I mean, like Heraclitus, and you know, he liked these because they were more. He felt they were more in touch, you know, with the physical, and the thought hadn't abstracted itself so much. And I think that's, I don't know who says this about Aristotle. Is like, you know, Aristotle then took the thought away even more from the physical reality. And so the history of Western civilization is basically, you know, abstract thinking. No, I mean, Tom thinks we've gone beyond, where we've, you know, rejoined that. I'm not quite so sure myself, but you know.
Yeah, I'm not.
I wouldn't go so far either, but you know, I just feel like that paradigm has been challenged quite a bit. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that in practice we're really beyond it.
Speaking of the pre-Socratics, this is a great book I would recommend. Peter Kingsley's In the Dark Places of Wisdom. Basically, it's about his search for Parmenides, who was one of those pre-Socratics. He argues basically that, you know, what was going on in Magna Graecia, Greater Greece, was more important than what was happening in Athens, you know, like Parmenides, Empedocles in southern Italy and Sicily. Like, this is where it was really at. And they, you know, they were almost Taoist in their understanding of things, right? But beginning with Plato, you had this emphasis on the light and the good and the beautiful. And so it's like half of our heritage, we've been cut off from half of it because of Plato and Aristotle and that whole Athenian trend. Whereas, you know, these Italian philosophers who are older and more ancient were they were connected to like the traditions of West and East. You know, they were at the crossroads of you know, well, originally these Italian and Sicilian colonies, they came from Asia Minor. They came from Anatolia, right? Modern day Turkey. So they were like at the crossroads of East and West. And so these descendants, Parmenides, Empedocles, and so on, their understanding of things was influenced by their forebears in Asia Minor, Anatolia, who, being, you know, geographically closer to like the Silk Road and so on, had knowledge of everything. Maybe even they were in touch with like Chinese thinkers, but definitely Indian, you know?
Interesting.
So
And when he talks about idealism, you know, in a negative way, like just going back to what we were saying, that's what he's referring to, I think. You know, the idealism. You know, I mean, I like Plato also, but I think, you know, he maybe misunderstood him in some way. But, you know, the idealism of Western philosophy, you know, abstracting, you know, from the body. So,
well, what I'm saying is that in a way, this guy, Peter Kingsley, seems to agree with Lawrence that, you know, it's indeed true. You know, Plato did, or I don't know, we could just call it Socratic philosophy. Plato, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and on and on. You know, they basically cut us off from half of our humanity, really. So I tend to agree with him on that. I mean, we can find the exact passage, but Lawrence says, yeah, Plato sets the ideal part of me in motion, or however he puts
this is
it.
in the essay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's only part of me, though, yeah.
But it's only part of me, right?
True.
And this is what we've forgotten. It's like the philosophers, and this is probably a kind of jab at people like Bertrand Russell, whom he knew, and they, you know, they became enemies in a way. And I love Russell, by the way. I love his writing, but, you know, that's to use the Lawrencian expression, Russell only affects part of me. It's not the whole me, right? Not the whole hog, as Lawrence calls it. But yeah, I've been talking too much. Someone else, please say something intelligent. Not intellectual, just intelligent. Do we want to keep reading, or?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, Tomek, you take over. How about the whatever is me alive is me? That's a good place to pick up, maybe.
Yeah, maybe, and with the preceding paragraph as well.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I'll read those two paragraphs. Or actually, no, I think you're right. Okay, so whatever is me alive is me. Every tiny bit of my hands is alive. Every little freckle and hair and fold of skin. And whatever is me alive is me. I'm trying to wonder where I should put the emphasis there. Whatever is me alive.
Is
Only my,
me.
It's
only
me.
my fingernails, those 10 little weapons between me and an inanimate universe. They cross the mysterious Rubicon between me alive and things like my pen, which are not alive in my own sense. We'll stop there.
Mm-hmm.
That is obviously the first time that the direct reference to Whitman was just like blazing for me. Like whatever is me alive is me. That just felt so leaves
Song
of
of myself.
yeah, song myself, leaves of grass. This is me, this is me, this is me, right? Like the blah 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 is me. The piper on the fields is me.
Mm.
Um and so I don't know if now or later would be an interesting time to bring up the tensions between them, what
Yeah,
Lawrence likes
now.
and doesn't like about Whitman.
Well, more importantly, you like what what is it that makes you think of Whitman here? And let's talk about like similarities and differences, the Lawrencian viewpoint versus the Whitman-esque.
Sure. So I feel more sympathies for Whitman because of his desire to universalize. So it seems so far in the essay that Lawrence is keen to stress the oneness of his body and mind, right? So very interested in the corporal, and but he's not as eager to go beyond that. Whereas Whitman's like more about melting the idea of individuality and seeing himself in not only nature but in all types of people, all classes of people, all ages, races, and and we know that for Lawrence that annoys him. That's maybe reaching that sort of ideal. Uh, and
I jump in. Oh,
yeah, let me just say one last thing.
okay.
Um, Soon in the essay, he's going to start juxtaposing the novelist with other professions, and so as he creates these hierarchies, that's when he really starts to annoy me, because it's like for me it's inevitable that we have these different types of people, and that would happen in any type of society. Like we need all the parts, and we wouldn't have a novelist without the scientist, and so on. So I got frustrated with his sort of effort to impose one above another, whereas for me I do want to create a harmony, and the harmony makes sense. It's not I'm not supporting that harmony just because it's like beautiful, but because it's compelling. Okay, Robert,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can I go?
please.
Yeah, I feel you're. I mean, I think his target. I mean, I mean, like with Eliot. No, I mean, Eliot wrote The Wasteland out of the devastation of World War I, and then I think, I mean, Lawrence started writing around the same time, but I mean, there's a part of the essay later on which I found very moving. When he talks about the dead people are the ones that fire the tear gas, or not the tear gas, the mustard gas. And if you're dead, no, if you're dead inside, this is
Yeah,
what you do, no.
yeah.
So his criticism to me was very much of the state, also of Western civilization, but he's focusing on what he felt caused that state, which is this distraction from the body, you know. And even when he says, I mean, I think it's in the next paragraph about that he doesn't, I don't think he discounts the universal. That's what I'm trying to say, I guess, but he doesn't want to make it into an ideal, because that's what's brought us to this destructive point. That's, you know.
I like everything you said. I just the way that he ends up, I mean, maybe we should save it for when he gets into that particular part, but the way that he
Well, it's the next
characterizes these different
paragraph, no?
professions seems very reductive.
Shall I read that? I don't know if it's the next paragraph.
It's not the
Yeah.
next paragraph, though.
Pretty much. I mean,
There's some beautiful imagery, though, by the way, in that next paragraph. I love the
Can of cherries.
Yeah, the can of cherries.
okay, I don't want to skip that then, if you want to put that. So.
Okay, so seeing my hand is all alive and me alive, wherein is it just a bottle or a jug or a tin can or a vessel of clay or any of the rest of that nonsense? True, if I cut it, it will bleed like a can of cherries. I always loved that simile. But then the skin that is cut and the veins that bleed and the bones that should never be seen, they are all just as alive as the blood that flows. So the tin can business or vessel of clay is just bunk. I like the colloquial. I'm remembering back to when I first read it. I liked the colloquial nature of that, you know. It's so informal. He in a way, I guess he was one of the first essayists to show me that you could address serious topics, but you could have a playful and, you know, informal style. So it was an important lesson for me as a young.
Bunk is one of his favorite words as well.
Yeah.
And it's side by side with the biblical reference, which is, yeah, as you're saying, he's showing that it's not just that he's being informal, but that he's being informal while talking about something that is usually considered like sacred. And of course, Lawrence loves his fruit, right? So can of cherries, fruit comes up in a lot. And what's the most famous one? I can't remember. There's the very sexualized eating of the. Pardon? Is it? It's not a pomegranate though. No, it's a fig. I think.
It could be. Yeah.
It's the fig that he eats in a very like sexualized, clitoral manner, right? In Women in Love, I think, right? And then there's a big scene of it in the film as well. The women are transfixed with this like very voluptuous carnal consumption of the fruit. So yeah, he's able to see the corporeal in, you know, or the sensual. He's able to see that all around him, right?
Eating that fresh fruit.
He's very,
Ludacris would say.
He's very driven by his libido, is Mr. Lawrence.
Come on, Tom. You're getting away from the essay, my opinion.
Sorry.
But I don't know. Because I think this is this point about what you said about Whitman, no? Because I love Whitman, but I see the intention of Lawrence was to be as universal as Whitman, but I think I don't know. I mean, it's now the right time. My idea about what happened in his life, I don't know. I mean,
yeah, go for it.
You know, I think he got too. Well, okay. So Woman in Love to me is his masterpiece. I would say, no, that he really put everything down there, you know, in that novel, in terms of what he thought about the ego, you know, the way that control is the dark stuff, no, in human life, no, between the two couples, you know, the one that want to control the other also sexually is what damages humanity, no. Instead, the other couple is like was an ideal relation somehow of respect, you know, openness, and so listening, whatever, no. So I feel things happen in his life around that time because he was kind of persecuted in England for his German wife during the war. I don't know if you guys know this story. No, they lived in Cornwall, and you know, they had a light on one night, and then they were, you know, accused of being spies, basically. You know, so I feel he wanted to have this, like he talks in this essay, you know, this man alive, this whole attitude to life. No, he wanted to you know, he always talks about wanting to find people to share this with. No, I mean, that was his quest, also why he left England, why he looked for it in so many different nationalities and different indigenous peoples. No, he felt he wanted this feeling of community, which was so lacking in what he found in England, no, in the suspicion, the war, persecution, and so. But I think something maybe hardened in him, no, at around that time. And so to me, the Woman in Love is, I don't know, in terms of creativity, this is his peak creativity. Like you talk about different artists, you know, achieving something. But then the later stuff, like this is maybe what annoys Tom, I don't know, is a kind of repetition somehow. Even Lady Chatterley, I think, is a step down from Woman in Love. No, I mean basically. So that's
Yeah. Yeah, artistically, Lady Chatterley's Lover is definitely not his peak. It's just because of the controversy that surrounded it. It's maybe his best known, but yeah, it's not. It's not, in my opinion, it's not his most important work. Okay, who wants to continue?
But just to follow up on that, then, Robert, I mean, you seem to be arguing that Lawrence experienced some disillusion, but then you say that his his follow-up works were repetitive. So wouldn't the disillusion then suggest like a darker output or something? Like if he was continuing to repeat, that means he still has the belief.
darker though. That's what he's credit, because I mean, I don't know where the feminists attacked him from, but I mean, I'm quite interested in the fact that he's not included even in some textbooks now. So he's not part of the great writer of 20th century canon in some textbooks. And I think a lot of result of that is I can't remember the particular feminist. No, she wrote a
Yeah, I
denunciation
know what you're talking
of
about. I
Lawrence.
read it
No,
in my
Kate
essay. I
Millett.
forgot as well.
Kate
Millett,
Kate
yeah.
Millett.
And so his literary standing, I think, took a hit. But I think this is from the, like I was saying, in the beauty of the books. For example, I knew an artist a long time ago. She said, he understood women in the rainbow the way he writes. He had this understanding, and so how he became then a target, a feminist, I think, is maybe from some of the stuff he wrote, in the Plume Sermon or later, because then he became more attracted towards the kind of quasi-fascist. I don't know. I mean, not maybe not fascist, but authoritarian, no? Idea of the ego. So it somehow that distorted his earlier. I don't know. I'm maybe talking too much.
No. All this is like
yeah,
is waking up my memories of exactly how I read him in the past. So yeah,
and
all
then
that
it's
is
a
making
shame. I think that
sense.
then we lose. If we don't read to me the trilogy, Sons and Lovers, Rainbow, Woman in Love. I mean, if then we're put off by the later stuff, I guess.
I'm not put off by it. As I say, to me, probably his most important work is The Man Who Died, which is the last of the official novels that we just looked at. I just find that there's declining quality with that exception. There's like a final burst of brilliance at the end there with The Man Who Died. I mean, the whole concept of the erection as the resurrection, that's brilliant, and that's a very that's been a very important concept for me personally, and aesthetically as well.
Would you like to talk more about the erection?
What do you want to know about it?
No, but I mean, I just don't.
I
don't know if
recommend
you can expect that me or
I
the
recommend it.
understand.
I recommend it. You should try it sometime.
I don't know if the audience will immediately understand this.
Well,
action.
the man who died is basically an allegory of the resurrection of Jesus, and Jesus was an important figure for Lawrence, and he was in many ways, like, biographically, people associated him with a kind of Jesus type figure. He was almost a guru or spiritual guide for certain people. But this, I mean, even though the Jesus character is never named, he's like a poor Palestinian young man who dies, or does he die and is resurrected. But the main thing is this character is associated with Osiris, the god who dies and resurrects. But anyway, there's a famous line where when this priestess of Isis tends him in his, I don't know, during his recuperation, he gets an erection and says something to the effect of "I am risen," So there's just this notion that the sexual reawakening is equivalent to the resurrection of the Christ or any of these vegetative gods like Osiris or Adonis, or pick your Middle Eastern fertility god. So he humanized that myth of the eternal return and the renewal of fertility.
Seems a bit rich, but okay.
Rich in a bad way, or
I just seems a bit of a stretch to okay, your penis has recovered its energy and now you're making that analogous with Christ's resurrection. I'm not sure. I know it can be a meaningful thing.
You're being reductionist, I would say. Can I interrupt?
Please.
No, I think this is where the danger of, like, with the idea of the feminists criticizing him, that he's easily parodied, for this. So this is what I feel is the danger. Then that's what you feel. I have my closest friend who died in a bike accident. His comment on Lawrence was that he never got over he had a penis. It's like, this is a kind of reductionist kind of idea that is easy to make, when
but also that you can understand, though. You can, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think it's taking something a little out of context also. So, because I feel that just hearing the Aldous Huxley interview at the beginning, I heard the part where he talked about tantra, because I think that's central really to the Lawrence view of sexuality. Somehow it's connected to the spirit for him. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
About that now or later, but so this, it's a beautiful book, the Man Who Died. So, but it's not, that's only part of it. No, also, there's a lot of other stuff in there as well. So.
Yeah, and what I said is not to completely denigrate Lady Chatterley. Like, there's some great passages in that. The conversations with the father, those are hilarious. And some of the descriptions of the interplay between the gamekeeper and Lady Chatterley herself, and the description of coitus, intercourse, sexual congress being the meeting of two others. It's like that for him, that was the most important thing. The man alive for a brief period, connecting with the completely other, which is woman alive or live woman.
But I feel that it's not to reduce it only to the sexual act is not the, that's what it became later in his writings. That's why I feel, it got reduced. But before, like in this is a beautiful essay that he's talking about just being alive by being, not doing anything, just sitting on like on a rock, like Aldous Huxley says, So
sure, but is it implicit in his writing, or is that just like the popular interpretation of it? Because I'm saying, like, these later works still have some, even though I'm arguing for a decline overall. There are still flashes of brilliance, which
Yeah, yeah,
are not these simplistic kind of pornographic, anti-feminist or whatever interpretations that
yeah,
he's
yeah.
sort of been saddled
Yeah,
with.
it's like we said, there is a contradiction there. Yeah, that some of the Lady Chatterley is very beautiful, and also um uh, I don't know. My son is just here, so
Hello, Kieran.
um children are very in contact with the body. It's very beautiful, no, as well, because they're not thinking too much yet. So that's what I find in this essay is, yeah, just being, yeah, not abstracting yourself. I don't know. I'm getting a bit lost here. So he's got my headphones. Um, but the idea of tantra, though, Mark, you would go with that, no? That's what he's describing, no? Because in another essay he describes as a normal orgasm as like a sneeze in the loins, no? I think that's a famous quote from somewhere.
I,
So
I hadn't heard that one. Well,
yeah,
he would probably object to like the naming of it,
yeah,
and I don't think he probably knew about Indian philosophy and so on, but I don't think he was as deeply steeped in it as, for example, Huxley. But
mm,
I mean, he even says something here like nirvana is merely a conjecture, right? So he's aware of all that, but he would probably say, "Oh, that's just conceptualizing tantra. I mean, why do I need to study that? I live it,
yeah.
through
That's what.
my
Yeah, but he's
experience."
describing it, from, I mean, whatever his own experience, but also as an
But it amounts to the same thing you're saying, and I
yeah,
agree.
yeah, yeah. Whether he uses it, but also um that that when he talks about his hand in this beautiful way, no, at the beginning of this essay, then the penis or whatever it is, we do get more sensation from that part of the body, no. So it's natural then that he writes about that as a kind of as the peak experience for human beings. No, if we're in the body, then obviously that's how we're going to experience something more intensely. No, but it doesn't separate it from the rest of the like in Ailey Chatterley, the most beautiful part that people write about is the tenderness. No, there is he talks about the word tender, which is what is taken out of the sexual act, like in Eliot, no, the carbuncular Clark, no,
Yeah,
there is
right,
no
right.
tenderness there. So this is what he's criticizing in the society has lost that, and
That,
that's
in
what I
fact,
feel
was the
we're still
original
living with. I
title.
mean, I would feel very intense and strongly that we're still living with, even more so, no, because we've been distracted. I mean, I don't want to go off on one, but but we've been taken away somehow even more strongly from that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
There's even
So
less. There's even
yeah.
less tenderness.
Uh,
Tenderness, by the way, was the original title for Lady Chatterley's Lover,
yeah.
but that was not. I guess it wasn't as marketable. Doesn't sound as exciting a book to read. But yeah, that's right. That um, after it's like what happens after the connection between, we won't even call it the sexual connection, but after man alive and woman alive come together, they can experience this tenderness, which maybe is a synonym for compassion. um, but yeah, it does relate to all of these
Empathy.
other, yeah, empathy. It does relate to all these other, high concept um, ideas that he would probably reject, but there is definitely a similarity there. Walt Whitman.
I'm enjoying.
Oh, okay. Why don't you? I mean, someone can read next.
Yeah, I'll read from
Sure.
the part where it talks about the different professions, because Tom,
Yes.
yeah, wanted to reflect more on that. I don't know. Um, and that's what you learn when you're a novelist. That's what you're liable not to know. If you're a parson, or a philosopher or a scientist or a stupid person. If you're a parson, you talk about souls in heaven. If you're a novelist, you know that paradise is in the palm of your hand and on the end of your nose. Both are, because both are alive, and man alive, which is more than you can say for certain of paradise. Paradise is afterlife, and I, for one, am not keen on anything that is afterlife. If you're a philosopher, you talk about infinity and the pure spirit which knows all things. But if you pick up a novel, you realize immediately that infinity is just a handle to the self same jug of a body of mind. Wow, as for knowing, if I find my finger is on fire, I know that fire burns with a knowledge so emphatic and vital, it leaves nirvana merely a conjecture. Oh, yes, my body, me alive, knows and knows intensely. And as for the sum of all knowledge, it can't be anything more than an accumulation of all the things I know in the body. And you, dear reader, know the body, know in the body. So,
I love this paragraph.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
it's beautiful.
just the use of stupid person always, um, entertained me. And then this notion, I for one am not keen on anything that is afterlife. Reading that as a young man was very important to me, and like nostalgically as I read it, it still resonates. And his use of the dear reader, the second person singular addressing us individually, not even collectively. It's like, you, dear reader, singular. He's talking. He's having a conversation with me. That's how it felt originally,
Well,
and
Whitman
even
does that
now.
too, right?
Sure. Yes. Well, that is one issue we can explore. Like, to what degree is Lawrence a failed Whitman? I mean, that seems to
Yeah,
be up your
he's
alley, right?
infinite.
Like, is he jealous? Is he resentful? Is he too British to be the American Whitman? I mean, he does have this fascination with Americans and
And
American
literature. Yeah.
culture. We didn't mention that other very important nonfiction work, studies in classic American literature. I mean, this reading this book like reintroduced me to these important American authors that I kind of took for granted. Having his outsiders, perspective, like, made me appreciate Melville and Hawthorne, and well, not Whitman, because I already appreciated him, but like, this is a great book for any student of literature in the English language. But yeah, my original question was, if Whitman is that ideal American author, to what degree is he Lawrence's ideal, and to what degree does he succeed or fail at, achieving that? That's probably a
Yeah,
question for you, Tomek. But
okay, go Tom.
Robert, you're our guest. I like giving you the floor
No, I
whenever
mean,
you feel inspired.
I think that's another way of saying what I said before, that unfortunately, because he was alive in the period that he was, in the persecution and the war, I think that he couldn't, and he tried, but he couldn't throw off, like you're describing, this Britishness aspect of his the negative British aspect, if there is a positive one, I don't know. um, this slight uptightness, and he had, because he was writing against what he had in himself, and I think he wanted probably to go beyond it somehow, but I mean, I'm conjecturing a lot here, but so like we said before, the prejudices that came out when he went to certain countries, that he still carried this aspect with him, because he talks about wholeness, no? I mean, this is what I think he had, if we want to say, like Tom said before, he had his own ideals, which was to, like he talks later in this essay, about that Shakespeare, Homer were whole in how they wrote, that's what
mm,
makes them great. But
hmm
and I think he wanted to achieve that, and I think he touched upon it in Woman in Love, but not after, because of his inability, to deal with his own psychology, perhaps, So
Well, he talks about that specifically in Lady Chatterley. He talks about what he calls the white man's disease and the white woman's disease, which is kind of a Western. Maybe it goes back to this Platonic or Cartesian split between mind and body. So he's very aware of it, but as you say, at the same time, he's also aware of how he's failed to transcend it himself. He's a creature of his own time, but he's prophetic in that he points the way towards maybe this reintegration of body mind that perhaps we in the early 21st century are finally, becoming aware of and correcting.
Yeah, I mean, I think he identified the problem very well. I think.
Yeah.
The Western. I mean, that's what struck me the most. I think, as a young man, the criticism of Western so-called civilization. Like Gandhi said about
Absolutely.
Western civilization. It would be a good idea.
It'd be a good idea.
That's
Exactly.
that's where I'm coming from. I suppose. So, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. So.
Civilization, as Baudelaire called it.
Yeah. Wow, that's a good quote.
So yeah. Oh, I wanted to say
I
something else about that.
My objections now, if you don't mind. So yeah, I mean, I think it's quite obvious.
Here we go.
No. It's quite obvious what I'm protesting against in this paragraph, but it's like you've got the way that he dismisses Parsons, philosophers, scientists. I mean, it's just so judgmental, and that again seems against the spirit of Lawrence. So I just don't understand how, on the one hand, he's like saying let's not get abstracted in the mind, or but here I am with all these judgments which are not particularly tender. It's, I mean, the idea that a scientist, he'll go on to say that scientists are fascinated with things once they're dead or something, right? Whereas, like, actually, if I think about like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying how, the true inspiration for a scientist often comes from like just the state of wonder of looking at the sky at night, or looking at a creature. And that's, I know the type of kid I'm thinking of who loves science is like obsessed with looking at butterflies, and seeing the wonder in them.
Now, did he say that before or after he pimped the vaccines?
So, yeah, I mean, fuck that. But yeah, so I just don't see the need here to make all these like grandiose statements. He wants to stick to the simple truth. Nothing's important but life. Then be in your body and try not to let yourself run away with too many ideas of how things should be.
Well, but
like,
that's why
humble.
he's cautioning against the parson and the philosopher, because they can trap people or trick people or deceive people, make them think, oh, that's the answer. They've got the answer. No, that's just one partial.
Okay, I guess I'm just
little
saying
piece.
he's not being particularly generous with.
This is what Blake did, Tom. No, the priests in black gowns are doing their rounds and binding my desires,
binding with briars my
and
joys and desires. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, you two are like very much steeped in similar traditions, and I've enjoyed both of your friendships at different times and simultaneously, of course. But yeah, I'm glad that you guys are both together today.
Finally, yeah.
So I think you guys have just met a few times on like our trivia games or so on. So here's to all of us hanging out at some point in person, especially if Robert
in Italy.
Yeah, exactly.
How about that?
Mark,
Yeah.
that's
if you want to come to Italy, you're more than welcome. Yes.
Awesome.
But yeah, I just think Lawrence just seems to have a kind of frustration with things, that a certain disquiet that I find tedious. It's like I want him to be kind of more accepting of how things are, or at least not necessarily accepting, like embracing. Like, I'm not saying, like embrace what's going on in Gaza, but come at things with a bit more of like not us and them, right? Not us and them. I don't like the using and theming that he's doing with these other peoples, because again, I just think
I think you're taking that a bit too seriously. I mean, there's a playfulness about it, right? He's not saying these people should be banned or exterminated or shunned necessarily, maybe in some instances, but I think I like this polemical nature. It's like he's I don't know, goading people to take notice of whatever it is he's writing about. He's a provocateur.
And if that's the interpretation, then I'm more receptive.
Well, that's how I read it. Yeah,
but I read it more as in like the novelist is the
Well, he's trying to make the case for it. He's like, that's what I am, and so in my opinion, I'm more in touch with. I mean, basically, if he felt differently, then he wouldn't be a novelist, right? He'd be a scientist, or he would never be a
that's
parson.
That's not necessarily true. I mean, again, you could be a novelist that celebrates great scientists, inspired philosophers. Like, it doesn't have to be.
I don't think he's saying that you can't celebrate great philosophers or scientists. I think he's saying that they are very limited in their views. They don't.
But that's the thing. It's like, haven't there been plenty of philosophers who would make the same, for example, the mind-body union? That I'm sure that philosophical theory is like steeped in people who are making that argument, So this idea that like
pre-Socratics, baby,
whatever, right? But like, of course, that argument's been made in philosophy. I mean, that's probably one of the central debates is a topic like that.
I know, right? But he's writing at a time when logical positivism is the big thing, especially in Britain.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So, and as I say, some of this may be directly influenced by his conflicts with Lord Russell, who again I greatly admire. I think he's a fantastic writer. His introduction to what's it called? A History of Western Philosophy. It's fantastic. But at the same time, it's not the Bible. The Bible's not the Bible either, right? Like you take something from that, but that is not itself man alive. And that leads us to the next paragraph.
I think both Robert and I want to talk. And I also want to say, like, each novel is just one. I do prefer literature to history, because I've told people who study history, I was like, why don't you just study literature where you get the history of whatever period is being described, plus you get like the real lived experience of the time. You're not kind of getting it on a statistical level, right? You're getting the emotions and the plots and so on, which is more real. But I guess I'm just saying, like, every novel is still just giving you a little chink. So
I don't think. That sounds vaguely racist, but okay. I don't think he would disagree with that, Lawrence.
Yeah, but that's kind of like the idea that you could get everything through a novel. Well, every novel is also very limited in its scope in some sense. Robert, go.
Duly noted.
I'm surprised you say that, living in Russia, Tom. No. Dostoevsky.
Yeah, but then I limited myself to Russian literature for a few years, and then I was so like relieved when I went back to world literature, because I realized like there was something slightly like oppressive about sticking to one nation's literature.
Dostoevsky is not universal.
Universal themes, but not necessarily universal like settings, for example. I know, and that does matter actually. And Russia does have a strong sense of like the feudal system coming through in a lot of the pre-revolutionary work. It's very much like you get kind of similar tropes of like the nobles, and then the romanticization or desire to educate the peasantry, whatever. But I'm just saying it was good for me to get out of that bubble too. Like it's always
But would
about
you-
trying to get out of your bubble. That's my point, I guess.
But would you agree that the novel, especially the Russian novel, is the great book of life? I mean, War and
Of course,
Peace.
if it's Russian, it's the best. It's the pinnacle of what humans can achieve.
It doesn't have to be Russian. Maybe
No, I'm
it's
just fucking, yeah.
maybe it's Women in Love, or some other work by pick your favorite author, Cormac McCarthy, or
Yeah, but see, again, I would just try to
whoever.
like not rank them and say more like it's the type of human that you are. One human will get that huge
Okay.
experience through music. One will get it through a painting. One will get it by looking at a blade of grass, and that would be the scientist. So, okay, Robert, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just need to keep in mind. I mean, like Mark said, the logical positivism was the philosophy at the time. I mean, that's what he felt as philosophy. No, Anglicanism was the religion. No, so all of these things which were deadening people, this
Yeah,
is what he objected to because
fair
he
enough.
saw the consequences of the deadening. I feel, he must have been sensitive in some way to the suffering which was caused by the First World War. So that's what I felt he wrote about. I mean, also in Lady Chatterley, no, it's a bit reduced, but the crippled man, can't satisfy the wife. Okay, there's the sexual theme, but he's the symbol of the redundant Western
Deadness.
civilization. No, so yeah.
How beastly the bourgeoisie is, especially the male of the species. This is what he's
so,
reacting against.
yeah, I mean, I relate to this kind of what you say is othering, I suppose, I mean, I think in the end it doesn't lead you anywhere, I would say, but I relate to it, I guess, from my own psychology, and for someone to express all of that like he does in this way, like we said, no, it feels othering, but it's at the same time, yeah, maybe I think it is playful, but I think there was maybe in the end a bitterness there, which is not attractive, I suppose.
Yeah, that's that's
Oh.
what frustrates me sometimes.
Well, I like it. I relate to it and sympathize with it. So this is what I'm saying. That's one of his idiosyncrasies that I actually appreciate and like because it's authentic. It's real, And okay, so it doesn't fit your ideal. It doesn't even fit his own ideal of tenderness and compassion and all that. But he's human too, He's like, maybe he's aiming towards that, but he hasn't fully processed the bitterness of being, forced to grow up in this dead society that brainwashed him and imposed all this fucking bullshit on him. And I mean, I relate to that too. I came up in the same type of environment, even though it's almost, at least half a century later. And I've not completely escaped all of that even now.
But
in
we're still suffering
middle
from this,
age.
no, I mean,
Exactly.
I mean, we've mentioned in passing, no, what did you say, pimping the vaccine and, Gaza. So, where does this come from? All of this,
we haven't learned.
We haven't learned. Yeah.
That's why this is still relevant. He helps us wake up in his way, despite all his faults, limitations. His maybe you could even say hysteria. I remember reading some critic saying his voice is sometimes hysterical, but always like recognizable.
I think I used that word today, by the way. I like to take credit for that.
Well, there you go. Maybe it was Terry Eagleton or someone, but yeah. So I'm gonna just continue because let's make our way through the text.
I can't stay too long away. I need to see my son at some point.
Sure. So he says, these damned philosophers, they talk as if they suddenly went off in steam and were then much more important than they are when they're in their shirts. It is nonsense. Every man, philosopher included, ends in his own fingertips. That's the end of his man alive. Maybe the tip of his penis, too. As for the words and thoughts and sighs and aspirations that fly from him, very important phrase coming up, they are so many tremulations in the ether. and not alive at all. But if the tribulations reach another man alive, he may receive them into his life, and his life may take on a new color. Another great simile coming here, like a chameleon creeping from a brown rock onto a green leaf. Beautiful. All very well and good. It still doesn't alter the fact that the so-called spirit, the message or teaching of the philosopher or the saint, isn't alive at all, but just a tremulation upon the ether, like a radio message. Brilliant. All this spirit stuff is just tremulations upon the ether. If you, as man alive, quiver from the tremulation of the ether into new life, that is because you are man alive and you take sustenance and stimulation into your alive man in a myriad ways. But to say that the message or the spirit which is communicated to you is more important than your living body is nonsense. You might as well say that the potato at dinner was more important. Now, this is the heart of the essay for me. Tremulations upon the ether. So he doesn't fetishize the book of life, right? He doesn't say, oh, it's the word of God and you should bow down before it. No, the only value that these books of life have for us is that they cause us to be more alive, you know? This was so important to me when I first read it, and reading it now, I still, recognize and celebrate its power. It's so correct. It's not the actual book, whatever it is. I've got Flann O'Brien's At Swim Two Birds here. It's not this fetishized object. This book, it's holy writ. No, it's what the book did to me and for me and how it affected me as man alive. How can you argue with that? It's so right. I just feel that in my,
in your body,
gut, in my solar plexus.
That was well said, by the way.
Well, okay, so you don't object to that?
No.
All right.
I mean, I like that. I like the way you've kind of made me reevaluate the text, and yeah, and I like the crowning being the isness, right? The lived experience and the isness rather than the abstraction is something that I definitely can get behind.
He doesn't deny the philosopher or the saint their teachings,
right?
If they're lived.
Well, as a creator of content or art or whatever, writing books, making music, and so on, I always try to remember these are just tremulations upon the ether. I'm just sending it out there. If it resonates with someone like a radio message, I like that simile, then that's great. If it causes someone else to be more alive, I've done my job as someone who, has, I won't even say created, but disseminated this, caused this tremulation upon the ether, So it really kind of dethrones the idea of the novelist, the great artist that everyone must make obeisance to and bow down to. No, he's just a man alive who occasionally said something or created something which resonated with others and made them more alive. That's it. That's so unpretentious and realistic and true to me.
And yeah, just following on that, nothing is important but life. I mean, I'm thinking of a poem like Ozymandias right here, right? I mean, better a live dog than a dead lion.
Mm-hmm.
So
life with a capital L.
But at the same time, better a live lion than a live dog. No?
That was a funny line too, yeah. And that reminds me of your poem, Mark, with the true we're all stars, but some stars shine brighter than others.
Yeah. Well, that probably had Lawrencean influence subconsciously. But yeah, life with a capital L. I remember that phrase too. Who writes like this? I mean, wait, this is a serious, respectable, canonical literary author, and he's just like, you can't imagine one of his contemporaries writing this. You can't imagine Eliot, for example, sitting down and writing life with a capital L. It just wouldn't happen, It wouldn't be dignified enough. It wouldn't be respectable enough.
Yeah, that's one of the criticisms of him. That he's not systematic somehow. No, that it's just this outpouring. I can't remember the exact criticism, but that's one of the criticisms of people made of him. No, so
This is hilarious too. And poor St. Francis might well apologize to his body when he is dying. Oh, pardon me, my body, the wrong I did you through the years. It was no wafer for others to eat.
and also the previous part that Tom
Yeah.
wrote to me. An angel cake. That he turned himself into a sort of angel cake. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, what's next? Do we want to continue or just kind of summarize? We're about an hour and a half in.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I wanted to refer to before that. And I mean, it's something I found out this morning, but I think I kind of knew already that there's a Eastern teacher. I mean, I'm sure you both know Krishnamurti,
Yeah.
that I feel there are a lot of parallels. I mean, there are some stuff on the internet where people can see the similarities between Krishnamurti, like in terms of like saying similarities to Blake as well. But this
And
idea that
Nietzsche.
yeah, but Krishnamurti, and I found out today he even visited him in Ojai, when in the 1920s. So
Wow.
he had an interest. I mean, before he really Krishnamurti crystallized his philosophy in quotes, but Krishnamurti himself said, "There's no use in my teachings unless you live them." So this is the
Mm.
same idea of what Lawrence is saying here. No, that it's okay. The problem is that these people have started to make a belief out of things. No, this is the dead end that people go down. No, and then we start lobbing bombs at each other for the beliefs that we have. No, which is it's different from the beliefs of other people. No, so this is and also in Krishnamurti the idea of not, and in Lawrence, that we become dead. No, this is what he talks about in this essay a lot. No, we become dead when we stop exploring and changing. No, so this is again goes back to the pre-Socratics. If we stop changing, then we've died. No, and then this is all the problems of humanity come from there. No, because some people have concluded that they're, you know, whatever,
Yeah, and
you
then you
know.
get your Yeats's best lack all convictions
Yeah,
because you got to
yeah.
float.
Well,
No?
yeah. So yeah. No, but that's a good quote. That then I don't know. That threw me a bit, Tom. But
Okay.
I'm
And
sure
the worst are full of passionate
yeah, the
intensity.
worst are full of passion. That's the line. Yeah. So this
Yeah.
is what he is warning against. No. So
Well, Krishnamurti has a great essay on education and the failings of education, and it's always reminded me of Lawrence's quote. I'm not sure where he said it, maybe in one of the essays. He says, "Education, which of the various me's do you intend to educate, and which do you intend to suppress?" So, you know and this is basically one of Krishnamurti's criticisms of education too. It trains you in a specific area, but it never gets what Lawrence calls the whole hog.
yeah, and even his own, one of the tragedies also of Krishnamurti's teaching is that people didn't seem to live what he taught. Even I've been to his schools, and it seems that they lost something somehow. Now, when you just intellectualize even something like that, it's possible just to, you think about it, but you don't really embody it somehow. No, so
Yeah, when it becomes crystallized into a teaching and fetishized and, you know, institutionalized,
yeah,
when it becomes mainstream, well, then it's already over. It's already dead, you know?
yeah, yeah,
It's already being fossilized and becoming like a museum piece, not something that's lived. And
mm.
again, this is something that Kingsley talks about in here. I can't recommend this book
Yeah, yeah.
enough. It's
Sounds
great.
good book.
All right, so should we wrap it up, or do we want
Can
to?
do. Can do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah, I think
looking
we've
at this.
covered most of what was in there now. So
I'm just looking at this paragraph here. The novel is the one bright book of life. Books are not life. They are only tremulations on the ether. There we go again. But the novel, as a tremulation, can make the whole man alive tremble. The tremulation can make the whole man alive tremble, which is more than poetry, philosophy, science, or any other book tremulation can do. Now, I agree with you, Tomek, to a certain extent that, you know, why can't poetry do that? Why can't even philosophy, or, you know, a book? This is basically a philosophy book. This made the whole man in me tremble. So maybe he's a bit too partisan in saying, you know, it's only a novel. Why not an album, or you know, even a philosophical work, or maybe a scientific theory even? That's a fair point, I think.
then Shakespeare didn't write novels either. No, so maybe he's using
Which he
novel in a kind of wider sense.
exactly, he says, yeah, the great old novels are Shakespeare, the Bible,
And Homer.
uh, Homer, and he, you know, he mentions
Yeah,
Plato
and
as
what
well.
I feel like if we go to the next page, I found some stuff that was really inspiring for me.
Where are you?
So if we go to let us learn from the novel,
Yeah, there it
let us
is.
learn from the novel. In the novel, the characters can do nothing but live.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I skip ahead, what we mean by living is, of course, just as indescribable as what we mean by being. Men get ideas into their heads of what they mean by life, and they proceed to cut life out to pattern. Sometimes they go into the desert to seek God. Sometimes they go into the desert to seek cash. Sometimes it is wine, woman, and song, and again it is water, political reform, and votes. You never know what it will be next. From killing your neighbors with hideous bombs and gas that tears the lungs, to supporting a foundling's home and preaching infinite love and being correspondent in a divorce. Here, I feel like he's more willing to put himself in all these different situations and admit that I am all of these things, and I like this.
Absolutely.
I like this incarnation of Lawrence. This feels very Whitman-esque, rather
Well,
than
And it's very,
saying,
it's moving as well. When I read that this morning, it's like, wow, yeah,
because it doesn't
I
seem like one ideal is following the sorry Mark, the wine, woman, and song, and the others are doing. No, it's like within the same lifetime you are going to be both of those me's that you were talking about, Mark, in terms of the education essay.
well, I think that's you know, that's the true Lawrence. So I would just suggest that you focus more on those passages than these others that
No,
you
and I think you
feel
guys
are
made good
like,
points as well about like Lawrence responding to the Anglican Church, to the logical positivism. Like it, there was a specific agenda there that
yeah.
maybe was more required.
Well, and you know, you're talking about how like every person could be me, you know, like that could happen to me. Maybe I would become co-respondent in a divorce, or maybe I would go out into the desert and seek water. And there's I can't find it now, but he says, oh, there it is. um, when he's talking about the Bible, you know, the 10 Commandments set the old Adam shivering in me. See, he recognizes that he has that in himself, warning me that I am a thief and a murderer
Yeah.
unless I watch it. But even the old Adam is only a bit of me. That was very important too. It's like, oh, yeah, so you know, all of the various me's that he talks about in this education quote, it's like they're all in us, but no one of them or even all of them together can define us, because we are men and women alive, and we can never be defined completely, right? The he We talked about mysticism, which of course is related to the word mystery. We ourselves are mysteries, and I think he's aware of that and makes us aware of that, you know, as well as any author in the English language, perhaps. You
What do you
know,
think about the fact that the gender seemed like an important division, though, for Lawrence, right? I mean, we can't define things, but we can say woman and man. I'm not saying he's wrong there. I'm just saying that does seem like a very delineated area.
well, it's like that. It's like that passage in Lady Chatterley I was talking about. It's like the springing of one life towards another. Like he's very specific about that. He doesn't like the mystical, well, at least at that particular stage, maybe he had flirted with the idea before, but the mystical union, you know, it's like, oh, the merging of man and woman into a kind of Taoist symbiosis. He seems to reject that. He's like, okay, that might happen um, for the brief moment or instance of orgasm, but really, what's so powerful about that is one other reaching out to another other, right? Like he seemed to,
Yeah,
you
he
could
didn't like
argue
Whitman's dissolution there. He wanted to
yes, right.
retain the individual.
Yeah. And he talks about this in one of the poems too, about, he says, I think it's the one about turtles and tortoises, right? And like there's like a cross on the shell of the turtle. He's looking at or whatever. He's like, why were we crucified into sex? You know, it's like the inescapable otherness. I mean, maybe it's just a question of emphasis, because you know the opposites are also a unity, but he at certain times would emphasize the distinctiveness and the otherness of the two, whether it's male, female, or you know, whatever, yin yang and so on.
I don't remember well enough. Unfortunately, I don't have the memory that you do. But do we remember like his understanding of woman and maybe what he wanted women to be? Did he have a pronounced view of that?
I
Robert,
think
do you
it's
know? Sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, I think it evolved. I don't think you can say this is Lawrencian woman. You know, it's in
Maybe
flux.
there was something though.
It's in flux. Well, yeah, Kate Millett would focus on one particular thing and say, see, that's evidence of his misogyny. I mean, it's kind of like the interpretation of Euripides. Like some people said, oh, Euripides is the Western world's first feminist. And then others, like Aristophanes, said, no, he was a misogynist. He hated women. And the same thing has happened with Lawrence. Like people read whatever they want to into
Like I said
his
before,
descriptions.
Tomek, there was an artist, very lovely woman I knew, and she said in the Rainbow she felt it was a writer who understood, I mean, also the sexual passages, what it was in the experience of love or intimacy, what it was to be a woman. No, I mean, I can't quote anything, and I've never haven't read it for a long time. So in those novels, no, the Rainbow, Woman in Love. So
Yeah, I mean, I would just be curious actually to look at those Millet quotes though, because I remember reading that part of sexual politics and being somewhat, at least if not in agreement, at least like amused, because let's not completely discount that criticism either, I guess is my
No,
point.
I mean, maybe Lawrence wouldn't himself. He wouldn't take pains to defend himself. He's like, okay, if that's what my tremulation upon the ether did for you, fair play to you.
it's the same as the comment we made about, the bitterness about different professions, philosophers and scientists. If try not to focus too much on that part, I would say, which is what this seems, because of the criticisms of him, that's what's been done, I mean, that he's not found always in textbooks now, which I think is a real
Right.
shame,
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
Because
Agree.
in life, there is right and wrong, good and bad all the time. But what is right in one case is wrong in another. And in the novel, you see one man becoming a corpse because of his so called goodness, another going dead because of his so called wickedness. Right and wrong is an instinct. This was so
I loved
important to
that.
me
Yeah, that
when I
was a
read
great
this.
section.
But an instinct, and this is the last paragraph, but an instinct of the whole consciousness in a man, bodily, mental, spiritual, at once. And only in the novel are all things given full play. This makes me want to write a novel. Or at least they may be given full play when we realize that life itself and not inert safety is the reason for living. Again, so inspiring.
Beautiful
For out
phrase.
of the full play of all things emerges the only thing that is anything, the wholeness of a man, the wholeness of a woman, man alive and live woman. Beautiful conclusion.
It's funny though, this mention of safety here, because the
Yeah.
cliche is that we get older and we start to value safety and security and comfort over the risk, and that's why you see a lot of these most passionate artists who are insisting on life over all things. They burn out, right? I mean, you get your Kerouac that burns out and feels frustrated. So again, I would just say that maybe there's a place for slowing down and for safety. I mean, it is asking a lot to rage against the dying of the light.
That's what you should do at the end. I don't know, to rage.
Maybe you should, or maybe you should chill.
Well, it would have been interesting to see how Lawrence dealt with that, in his senescence. Huxley was talking about that earlier. Like,
I heard Joe Rogan has started going to church. Did you know that?
I mean, not interested, but
it's
not
just funny,
surprised
right?
either.
Yeah, but it's like this.
Yeah, good for him.
This twilight movement to inert safety.
I prefer to rage.
Yeah. Well,
Robert, you don't rage that much, bro. you like comfort.
Speaking of rage, there's a great travel book about Lawrence called Out of Sheer Rage by Jeff Dyer, I want to say his name is. And
Jeff Dyer, he wrote a good biography of Lawrence.
Robert, you like sunshine and Scrabble.
Comfort is not safety.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I don't know what do you see yourself? What do you see then as this raging?
Inert. I think the key word in the last line then is inert. No, inert is something dead. No, and he's talking mentally. No, when you become self-satisfied,
Yeah, sure.
Then you become inert.
Sure.
All right.
The tip of my fingertip wants to release urine.
Okay. Well, then,
but I can either hang on or
no. I think this is a good place to wrap it up. I mean, we've made our way through the essay, and I think we touched upon the important points. I mean, for me, the big takeaway is tremulations upon the ether. I mean, that phrase makes me tremble. Okay, I think it's a great notion to keep in mind as we create, produce, hopefully not take ourselves too seriously and not fetishize what it is we create. Those things our creations only have value to the extent that they are alive and that they, resonate with other people who are alive. How about
the idea
that?
of tenderness? I love this part of our talk, because I think that's what we need to keep. So
Yeah, and the critics of Lawrence would do well to keep in mind that he was very aware of that, you know, and he was an advocate for what we might call empathy or compassion.
Okay, and the thing I'm gonna highlight is what we mean by living is, of course, just as indescribable as what we mean by being. So the attempt to capture any of this is futile. It's just like the Tao, you know? You can't define it, you can only be it or experience it.
I think I think Lawrence would agree with you, and he was well aware of that. All right, so okay, so this has been season 4, episode 7 of texting, and we'll be back soon with episode 8. Who knows what the topic will be?
I know what the topic is.
Oh, you do? What is it?
We're gonna, if we follow, we can either change up the exact format or we won't, but you and I will both submit 32 different consumables. They can be dishes or they can be individual ingredients. We may have to argue about whether they should just be like single objects like chicken, or they would be like a dish like chicken Kiev. Do you know what I'm saying?
So we're gonna chicken Kiev.
So we'll put the 32 each. We may bring on some guests. I'm sure Hanya would love to be on that one.
So it's another tournament, huh?
It's a tournament,
another 5-hour marathon.
It's based because it's gonna be based on food, and we're gonna, hopefully we'll move quicker, and it'll be, it'll be like Swiss cheese against linguine.
So it's the mukbang episode.
Yeah,
we're gonna actually eat the food on camera.
Eat the dogs. Eat the dogs.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll look forward to that.
Robert, we appreciate you taking some time out of your busy father life.
Yeah. Thanks for your Lawrencian insights. Hope you enjoyed chatting with us.
Good, enjoyable conversation, guys. So thank you.
All right. I'm going to stop the live stream. And